Welcome back to the Splash Live. I am Larry Nilan. Well, a survey in 2020 showed that 63% of millennials and Generation Z did not know that over 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. Half could not name a concentration camp, and most shockingly, 23% say they believe the Holocaust was a myth or had been exaggerated. Joining us now is Jennifer Sepetys, who teaches a course at West Bloomfield High School to ensure that young people are educated about the Holocaust. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, can you start off first by talking about what inspired you to teach a course that's centered around genocide and the Holocaust?
Well, my first class I took, right, the first class I taught as a teacher was in Ferndale, and it was the Holocaust through literature. And then as a social studies teacher, every year I was teaching some aspect of the Holocaust through social studies classes. When I came on to the high school, I took over a class called Global Studies of Genocide, and the Holocaust was already part of the curriculum. So I was able just to add more to it.
And so, for years, you've been teaching kids about the Holocaust, but this past July, you were able to take a trip to Poland and view and experience the places that you've been teaching about for so many years. Can you tell us about how that trip came about?
Yeah, so I've been teaching about the Holocaust for 17 years. And last year, I was part of the teacher advisory board at the Zeckelman Holocaust Center for a year, and we were helping to develop curriculum and write lessons for teachers who were bringing their students to the museum. So while I was part of that group, there was an opportunity that came up to fill out an application to go to Auschwitz-Birkenau with the Memorial Foundation in conjunction with the Zeckelman Memorial Center. So I completed the application, kind of crossed my fingers, and then I was one of 32 teachers across the country that was chosen to be able to go to experience this amazing educational trip.
So, a lot of times when you go to visit something that you've read about and seen photos and things like that, like what your impressions are and what you actually experience are quite different. Could you talk about some of those emotions and your experience there?
Yes. Well, what I tell my students is some of them do come in knowing some information about the Holocaust, and I'll tell them, you will never know everything. You can never know enough, and you learn something from every individual, every testimony that you read. So going there, I was shocked as soon as I went into really Auschwitz-Birkenau that I could hear the testimonies and hear the voices of survivors who had shared their stories with me and all my students over the years. As I was walking across the grounds, just some of their words were replaying in my mind. I was not at all prepared to hear their voices. And I think also just seeing everything, seeing how huge and expansive everything is at Auschwitz, Birkenau. What also surprised me was the ghetto wall. I knew that it had been destroyed and bombed, but I was not prepared to see how little of it is left, and that people are living in apartments just surrounding the ghetto walls now, where there's only a fraction they're trying to preserve it that's there today. So that surprised me. I was expecting it to be larger than it was.
Did you get any impression from the folks who do live nearby it? Is it something, it's just such a part of their daily life that they don't even think about it? Or is it something that kind of weighs on them that they're living so close to where such tragedies occurred so many years ago?
We didn't speak to anybody who is living nearby. We did have a guide who accompanied our group through Warsaw and Krakow and also was in Auschwitz-Birkenau with us. So he was telling us that this is just part of their everyday life. They know where they're living because they're used to having visitors kind of walking around their backyard and The lights just went off in my classroom. Walking around in their backyard. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Okay. Um, so they're used to having visitors walking around, but we didn't get a chance to talk to any of them.
I read that there was some significance when you were looking at some of the remnants of what still remain in the ground, in the gravel, and there was a button that was on the ground there. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. The button just completely stunned me. I have, again, taught about the Holocaust for so many years and was familiar with what I was going to see at the museum. But this button, I was absolutely not prepared to see and just burst into tears because the button was on an area of the grounds that was called Canada. And Canada, it was a warehouse where the prisoners were sorting through suitcases, sorting through belongings, and organizing things that the Nazis were keeping. And they blew it up eventually when they were about to be, once the site was discovered and the Allies were coming over. So they destroyed it. But pieces of it and fragments of things are still being found today in the grounds, which I had no idea. So part of this is sectioned off. You're able to walk through it, and there are signs to say, please do not take anything with you. Everything needs to stay here as part of the museum. So I'm looking through the ground, and then I see this white button. And it just came flooding to me, the thought of this button belonged to somebody. This was on somebody's clothes, and what happened to that individual. So just this single button was really powerful. And I think that's important because it does tell a story. An individual person was here and is no longer with us.
So Jennifer, I started this segment talking about the lack of Holocaust knowledge that so many young people seem to have these days. What do you find with the students who take your class as to what kind of knowledge most of them have as they enter your classroom?
They have some knowledge from middle school. Some of them have visited the museum themselves. So it's general information, and they have no idea once we get into the weeks we spend on it, because nobody has really spent weeks with them, about 4 weeks, covering the Holocaust. So they learn a lot more detail, a lot more information, and most of them are shocked that they've never learned it before. And they also wonder, how can we prevent this type of genocide from happening again in the future?
So that leads me to that there was another shocking statistic amongst all those others that said that over 50% of Americans believe that something like the Holocaust could happen again. And I wonder, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, not only people's belief, but could it happen again?
If people don't step up and say something, I think it's so important to prevent discrimination, to stop the anti-Semitism, and to stand up for each other, because there's definitely a lot of senseless violence and killing that we see around us, and just there needs to be more kindness and empathy. So, we talk about that in my course because we're covering a whole lot of genocides, and there are still genocides happening today. And we need to do everything we can as individuals and then as people to speak up and help to support those who are in trouble, who are being discriminated against, and who are under trauma right now.
So Jennifer, before I let you go, I understand that recently you were voted the Regional Teacher of the Year. Could you tell us just a little bit about that honor that you received?
Yes, that was a huge honor. I'm really excited to represent Region 9 as the Regional Teacher of the Year for Michigan. So I will be helping to support teachers and students throughout this school year. And one of my main platforms is student mental health. I'm also currently enrolled in Oakland University, working on a PhD in student mental health. So I'm doing really everything I can to help support our students this year across the state.